Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of Cinema Chat, my weekly movie podcast. And on today's episode, we will be discussing the DCEU in honor of the release of The Flash. Quick note at the beginning of this podcast, sorry about no episode last week. I had one recorded. We're going to talk about all the Transformer movies where I shat on them quite a bit, most of those later sequels. And then I went to edit it, English. I went to edit it, and half of the audio file was corrupted. And so, yeah, I couldn't do it, and it was too late to sit down and re-record the whole thing. So, that is my lame-ass excuse for no episode last week, but we're going to power through it and get you one this week, and a pretty interesting one this week because it's the DCEU, right? So, I've covered the DCEU, I'd say quite a bit on my channel. I mean, I have reviews for 1, 2, 3 of the movies on my channel, and I have a ranking of the DCEU as well. So, yeah, I've covered it quite a bit on the channel, but I don't know, I just thought it'd be a good time to revisit it because The Flash just released. And surprisingly, it's getting fairly mixed reviews, because I'm sure a lot of people saw that early buzz that was calling this one of the greatest comic book movies of all time, just absolutely blowing this movie, right? And I came out of the movie and I wasn't quite there, right? I still think it's an amazing superhero movie. I wouldn't say it's in my top 10. Don't even think it's in my top 20 favorite superhero movies of all time. But I thought it was amazing, right? So, seeing all these reviews that are kind of lukewarm and stuff kind of shocked me, honestly. And seeing it underperform at the box office this past weekend was a little surprising too, just given all the stuff that this movie had going for it. And honestly, I thought Michael Keaton back as Batman would have a little bit more draw to it box office wise. But yeah, I guess people just don't want to see it, maybe because of all the behind the scenes stuff with Ezra Miller, or people just don't care about the DCEU anymore now it's going to reset. But yeah, who knows. But yep, so today we're going to talk about all the DC ranking wise. I'm going to go off my Letterboxd list. If you want to follow my Letterboxd, it's at FoxNervig. There should be a thing on your screen right now. I put it on all the still images I use for my podcast because, I don't know, I think my Letterboxd is pretty cool. And I love Letterboxd. It's such a fun app for movie nerds. So yeah, you can look at my list on here. I don't have reviews or anything on my Letterboxd. I just rating things. But I make a lot of lists on there. A lot of pretty cool lists, I would say. So, yep. We will start off from worst to best. So, coming in 14th place, movie-wise. I guess there's technically 15 things in here, but Letterboxd doesn't have Peacemaker, so I'll just kind of insert Peacemaker when we get to there. So there's technically 15 things, but only 14 movies, so I'm just going to say the movie numbers on here, then we get to Peacemaker, we'll be like, hey, this is where Peacemaker goes. Anyways, coming in 14th place, not only my least favorite DCEU movie, but my least favorite superhero movie of all time, and one of the movies I absolutely refuse to own, and that is Justice League 2017. I don't own this movie. If you've watched any of my reviews, you know I got a sexy, badass physical media collection, right? I love collecting Blu-rays. I collect anything, right? I mean, just the other day, I picked up Children of the Corn 2023. Well, I guess 2020, because that's when it was technically first released, but then they wide released it this year. Whatever. Don't give a shit. That movie sucks. My least favorite movie of the year. I still picked it up because it was on clearance, right? Justice League 2017, I don't want to own that movie because there's no point in me ever owning that movie. I will never rewatch this movie ever again as long as I live. Because, as you will see very much higher on this list, we got Zack Snyder's Justice League. So the last time I watched this movie was the day before the Snyder Cut came out, just because I wanted to refresh myself on it. And it's just not a good movie. But then you watch the Snyder Cut, and it makes this movie just look like a piece of shit, right? It is so inferior to Zack Snyder's original version. Every change they made was worse. Um, no offense to Joss Whedon, but his directing style does not mesh with Zack Snyder's style in the slightest, right? Even though Joss Whedon's given us two of the greatest comic book movies of all time with Avengers and Age of Ultron, right? So he can direct good superhero movies, good superhero team up movies too. But this movie is just so mandated, right? Warner Brothers mandated so much stuff to Zack Snyder and just fucked with his original vision so much that you get this weird ass Frankenstein's monster of a superhero movie that was maybe passable when you first saw it, but then after you watch the Zack Snyder version, it's just like, why the fuck would I ever watch this movie ever again, right? When there is a better version out there that I can and will watch. So, yeah, this is a movie that I probably will never watch again, just because if I'm in the mood for Justice League, even though it's 4 hours long, I will always watch Zack Snyder's cut of this movie. Because, yeah, this movie's a pointless existence. So, yeah, it's one of the few movies I refuse to own in my Blu-ray collection. And if you see either of my like total Blu-ray collections and you see me shit on some movies, right? Like some of those Wrong Turn sequels, Wrong Turn 5, which might just be one of my least favorite movies of all time. I still own that, and I'm fine with owning that. I'm not okay with owning this Justice League just because it's just, the fuck are we doing here, guys, right? So, yeah, I don't like this movie at all. Coming in 13th place, woof. This is a movie that I hate. And the more time I sit on this movie and the more times I rewatch this movie, the more and more I dislike it. And this one's in my bottom 5 superhero movies of all time. That's Wonder Woman 1984. This movie fucking sucks, dude. It is downright cringy. The plot is incoherent. Every time I watch this, I'm just like, what are you doing? This is not good. It doesn't make sense logically. So much weird shit in this movie. And I just cringe at so much stuff that happens in this movie. Like the whole cheetah thing when she turns into a literal cheetah. Weird as fuck. The whole way they bring Chris Pine back is just woo. That's somewhere you shouldn't go in a movie. Just the whole plot about this stone that can give you wishes, but now Pedro Pascal is this stone. He's just tricking people this whole time. It's just, it's just not good at all. And every time I watch this movie, I hate it even more. Right? None of the action sequences are very good or memorable to me. It's just it was very disappointing, right? Because this movie came out on Christmas Day 2020, right? I had a very long day, Christmas 2020. I was out of town, flew back home. Well, yeah, it was Christmas. I was out of town, flew back home, had Christmas with my whole family, and then I went to like a 10 p.m. showing of this movie with 2 of my friends on Christmas Day. Like, all 3 of us left our family events early on Christmas Day to go see Wonder Woman 1984. And we all hated it. So, yeah, this movie isn't good at all. Number 12. It's another disappointment. Suicide Squad 2016. The trailers to this movie made it look awesome, right? Those trailers are awesome. And to this movie's credit, I think some of the casting here is really good, and I think this is actually a really good concept. However, executed terribly. The plot in this movie, I don't know what the fuck is happening in this movie, and this movie came out, what, 7 years ago? And I still, every time I watch this, I still get confused at what the fuck is happening in this movie. It's just like that's the biggest knock towards this movie is I genuinely can't tell you what happens in this movie because I don't understand it. And I've seen this movie probably a dozen times, and I still don't know what the fuck happens. So, yeah. Also, like with what I was saying about how I like the concept to this movie, they just executed it at such a weird time. Because I believe this is the third movie in the DCEU, right? The only two movies you had before this were Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. And then you decide to do your villain team up movie? Like, I think Suicide Squad, you should do like 10 or 12 movies down the line, and then you bring back all your villains from your previous movie so your villains are already established, and you don't spend the first 45 minutes of your movie introducing you to characters with 20 different pop songs, right? So, it's just so frustrating that they just did this right away instead of waiting until they had an established universe with established villains and just use those because it would have been way better. But yeah, this is kind of when I was like, ooh, the DCEU, what you doing, guys? So, yeah, I am not a fan of these bottom three whatsoever. I think all three of these bottom ones are really bad movies. So, yeah. But with that being said, from here on up, I would say all of these movies are at least good to really good to three movies I would consider to be amazing. And then a TV show also. So coming in 11th place is going to be this year's Shazam! Fury of the Gods, right? I thought this movie was fine. I mean, it's just more Shazam stuff, but it's pretty generic, right? And it kind of has this movie, Black Adam and The Flash, kind of all have a similar feeling to them for me personally walking into them of like, yeah, I might be interested in this movie, but we know the DCEU's resetting, so like this doesn't mean anything, right? So it's not like in the long run it doesn't mean anything. So like the post-credit scenes in this movie where Shazam joins the Justice Society, like, oh, that would be cool to explore in a sequel. But we ain't getting a sequel. So what does it mean, right? It doesn't mean anything. So yeah, it's fun. Yeah, I had a good time with it, but it doesn't amount to anything, right? Which, you know, some people might argue that they want standalone comic book movies, you know, stuff like The Batman that we got last year, which was really damn good. Some people might be like, yeah, I don't really want a shared universe. And it's like, yeah, that's fine. But when you have a movie that's already a part of the shared universe and you're going to tease stuff further down the line for the shared universe that isn't happening, it's like, why? Like, just why? Right? But, yeah, but otherwise, I just thought the movie was fine. More Shazam stuff. The two Shazam movies, it bothers me that, like, everyone's a Shazam. It's like, it kind of takes away from just one person being Shazam and it being like, oh, that's cool. When you have, like, 6 Shazams in your movie, it's not as interesting to me, right? Also, I thought just the way they characterized Billy Batson / Shazam, how, like, the two different characters were just, they just acted so different from each other. So that was annoying. I thought the villains were pretty weak and generic in this movie, so whatever. Alright, coming in 10th place, and this one might be a little bit of a hot take, but 10th place is going to be Wonder Woman from 2017. Right, you know, I like this movie. I think, what's her name, Gal Gadot plays Wonder Woman very well. I really like the story here in this movie, kind of being this World War I story, I believe. Right, it's World War I? Yeah, I believe so. Um, so just like this superhero World War One story, I thought was really interesting. Gal Gadot and Chris Pine are fantastic together in this movie. I think the action's really good. It's just this movie just I don't know. It's just never resonated with me as much as it does with everyone else, right? Which I totally see all the things that everyone praises this movie for, and I agree with you, but they're just not as impactful, or I don't think they're as great as everyone says they are, right? So it's just one of those things where I'm agreeing with everyone on like all their positives and all their negatives towards this movie. Like I 100% agree with everything that most people say about this movie. It's just the positives aren't as positive to me, and the negatives are about the same, if that makes sense. So it just kind of falls in the middle here, right? Where I like the movie, but I don't love it, right? I don't really know how to explain it that well, but that is my way of explaining it. So let's go with it. All right, coming in ninth place is going to be Aquaman. I really like the character of Aquaman, and I think Jason Momoa plays him fantastically. I really like this movie's like kind of lore with the Atlantean stuff. You get to see all this cool underwater world with a bunch of really campy and over the top action, a lot of really vibrant colors. You get Patrick Wilson here as a villain. And it's just kind of this fun globe-trotting adventure, right? That is goofy, but it's like the perfect amount of goofy, right? Where it's fun and it doesn't feel like parody like Thor Love and Thunder, right? So, um, yeah, I have a good time with this one. If I'm in the mood for just a really campy but fun superhero movie, Aquaman will definitely do the job for me. Number 8, gonna be Black Adam. I think I enjoyed this movie a little bit more than most. Yes, it is a very generic superhero movie, but as someone who adores superhero movies, a generic superhero movie is good to me, right? And I will get enjoyment out of it, more enjoyment than most will. I think The Rock, who's just a really fun actor in my like probably my favorite genre of movie. Um, I mean, I'm sold there, and so just getting to see him do like his own darker version of Shazam um, was fun. The Justice Society was pretty cool. Um, but I mean, like the villain, super generic. Um, I mean, it like the thing I said with Shazam, where it's like, well, we're resetting the DCEU, so what does this mean, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, I had fun with it. I agree with all the flaws that everyone says, where like this movie's just too generic for him, and you could pretty much guess all the beats to this movie as you're watching it if you've seen a movie before. So I don't know. I had fun with it. Sue me. All right, coming in seventh place is going to be Shazam, and this was a pretty big surprise for me, right? From the trailers, I had like no interest in the movie. I was like, "What? This doesn't look good. Like, what are you doing, DCEU?" Because this was kind of in the era where everyone was like, "The DCEU, it's kind of shit." And somehow, some theater in where I live was doing like a 2 week early screening of this movie. And so I saw it like 2 weeks early, and I was like, you know what? That was actually really fun. Um, just seeing Zachary Levi play this man child, where he's literally this kid who becomes a superhero, and Zachary Levi just plays that kid so awesomely, and just plays out what a kid with superpowers would do. it's just so funny what he does with the role, right? And he just does a really good job with it. So, yeah. The movie also has a pretty good like emotional side and emotional story about Billy Batson and his mom, which I thought was really cool. Um, I mean, the villain in this movie isn't anything special. It got some weird ass CGI with the seven deadly sins. I don't think those look very good. I don't like their designs. And I don't really like how everyone becomes a Shazam at the end. It just kind of takes away from the um, singular special, whatever. I don't know how to phrase it. The special singular Shazam. There we go. The SSS. The special singular Shazam. I can't even say it, but yeah. So Shazam is a really fun superhero movie. So yeah, pretty big surprise for me. Number 6 is going to be The Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. This movie is kind of like the DCEU's Deadpool, right? I've always thought of it as really, it's just really funny. Um, I mean, Harley Quinn is just a standout character in this universe, played fantastically by the great Margot Robbie. So she's great in the role. Just like this movie is pretty weird, but it's like weird in a good way, right? Because it's like told through the mind of Harley Quinn, who's like this insane person, right? And so you just see all this insane stuff happening on screen. You get a lot of really fun and really good action in this movie. If I remember correctly, I think some of the fight choreography in this was done by some of the people who did the John Wick movies. So, yeah, that's awesome. Um, it's really funny, got some really good humor in there. I think Ewan McGregor's a really fun villain. I think when you get the Birds of Prey all teaming up at the end, I think that's really fun. So yeah, I do have a lot of fun with this movie, and I'm not sure what are some big flaws with this movie or anything that I really have negative towards this movie. At least nothing I can think of right now. So yeah, Birds of Prey, pretty good one. All right, top 5 movies. Still haven't talked about Peacemaker yet. That's somewhere up here, but my counting's off. Anyways, number 5, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Okay, this is one of the most polarizing superhero movies of all time, and I am on the side of people that actually really enjoy this movie. I really enjoy it. However, I will admit is a very flawed movie. But if you watch the Ultimate Edition, I think it's a better movie, but it's still flawed. Um, so, a long ass time ago, I think it's still on my channel, I did a Batman ranking when the Batman Last Year came out. So I guess that's not a long ass time ago, but whatever, we'll call it a long ass time ago. When I did that, I said one of the most genius things I have ever said in my infinite wisdom. I said Batman v Superman is like an overstuffed burrito, right? To where your tortilla is the movie, and then all your toppings and stuff inside your burrito is what you're trying to cram into your movie, right? But you put too much onto your tortilla to where you can't make the burrito, but it still tastes good, right? That is kind of my analogy with Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. There is too much going on in this movie, but it's all good, right? Like, you have the setup of the Justice League in here, you have the setup of Batman in here, you got the Batman v Superman stuff, you got a sequel to Man of Steel in here, you got the death of Superman, you have all this shit going on, right? And all of it's interesting, and I have a good time with this movie, but it's way too much for one movie. You could have easily made this 2 separate movies. It would have flowed a lot better. You would have been able to develop things longer. You would have had 2 amazing superhero movies instead of just one really good superhero movie, right? So that is kind of my analogy for this movie, is that it is overstuffed, but it's really good. But it's all good stuff. But there's just too much good in there. Too much stuff. Um, but yeah, I mean, the action in this movie is fantastic. I mean, it is a Zack Snyder movie, and I'm a big Zack Snyder fan. So yeah, I really enjoy Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. But I do think the ultimate cut is significantly better than the theatrical cut. All right, fourth place, The Suicide Squad. God damn, this was also a big surprise. When they said they were making a sequel to one of my least favorite comic book movies of all time, I was like, are you kidding me? You're making a sequel to that pile of shit? It's probably also going to be a pile of shit. Well, it wasn't. It was actually fucking hilarious. I love that they went rated R with this movie and just had so much James Gunn fun humor in this. You got wacky characters like Polka Dot Man, like what the fuck? But he's awesome. John Cena as Peacemaker is amazing. I adore Peacemaker. You get Idris Elba in here. Like, you just get a fantastic cast. Their chemistry with each other is hilarious. They're this movie's just a blast of a superhero movie. My big negative towards this movie is that I think it tapers off a little bit in the third act. I'm not the biggest fan of them battling this giant starfish at the end of the movie, but whatever. I still have a blast with this movie, and I think it is a huge improvement over that original Suicide Squad. All right, top 3, and I love all 3 of these movies up here. So, coming in third place is going to be Man of Steel. Now, I know I had seen this movie years ago, but never remembered it. So, might as well have watched it for the first time last year. And I thought this movie was incredible. I thought Henry Cavill is a great Superman. Sad we'll never see him again, but I thought this was a great introduction to that. It's a darker, grittier take on the character. Way different take than the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, that's for sure. Yeah, I think Michael Shannon as Zod is incredible. Just like the whole, it's a fairly quote unquote classic Superman story, right? But it's just told in a darker fashion, and just is more, it's Zack Snyderized, right? And I think the visuals are awesome in this movie. I think this movie's incredible. So yeah, this is, as far as Superman solo stories go, this is my favorite, just straight up Superman movie. So yeah. All right, second place, the one we've been waiting for, The Flash, the newly released one. Yes, it is this high. I thought this movie was great. I loved this movie. The Flash has never necessarily been a character I've been all that interested in, but I thought he was good in this movie. The Flash was good in this movie. Let's not kid ourselves. We were all here for Michael Keaton's Batman, who kicked ass in this movie, I shall say. So, I was thoroughly pleased with the return of Michael Keaton as Batman. I thought Supergirl was awesome in this movie. I thought the way they meshed stuff from like Man of Steel in here with Michael Keaton's Batman, while also it being a very Flash-centric story. They just balanced everything so well. All the multiverse and cameos and stuff were done very well, and it didn't just feel like a gimmick. It felt like a very natural part of the story. Yeah, like literally the only negative I really have towards this movie as of this moment in time is the CGI. The CGI is just downright awful at some times, especially when he's running in the Speed Force. I'm like, what the fuck am I looking at? Like, it is not good at all. Like, and the fact that they sat on this movie for like 2 years. In 2 years, no one watched this movie through all your test screenings and no one told you your CGI was bad. and you didn't fix it in 2 years while you were waiting to figure out what to do with this movie. So, yeah, that's a little bit irritating, but I thought this movie was fantastic. I'm really surprised that it's underperforming at the box office, honestly. Um, so, yeah, I've seen the movie twice now, loved it both times. So, yeah, I thought it was great. I have a full review, go check that out. All right, the time we've been waiting for. Next up, we'll call it 1.5. Peacemaker, right? Because I can't put Peacemaker on my letterbox list. Peacemaker, I love Peacemaker. I mean, he was a standout in the Suicide Squad. I love John Cena as an actor. I thought this show was hilarious. It was my type of humor the whole time. It was violent. It was James Gunnified. It was hilarious, right? Just all the one-liners and riffing they do throughout this whole series was awesome. Um, I just loved this series so much. Just this is like the character that John Cena was like born to play. It feels like just like all of what he says and does and the way he acts. It's just like so natural and just feels very John Cena-y, right? So I thought Peacemaker was fucking incredible. Um, yeah, can't wait for Peacemaker season 2. And it is this high on this list. It is my second favorite thing to come out of the DCEU. But of course, my number one, which it's pretty funny that we're bookending with both versions of this movie. Or we're starting the list with a version of this movie, we're ending it with a version of this movie. Number one, of course, Zack Snyder's Justice League. Like, come on. This movie is amazing. I mean, I watched this movie. Funny story. I watched this movie. Our TV that we have at home here, it wasn't capable of having a streaming service on it. It wasn't capable of having HBO Max on it. Because I didn't know what a Roku was at that point in my life. And then I discovered what a Roku was like a week after this movie came out. But anyways, so I sat on my couch watching this movie on my phone for 4 hours straight. Damn. It was a great 4 hours, but damn. Literally every single thing in this movie is better than the 2017 theatrical cut. There is absolutely zero things that I prefer about that theatrical cut than I do to this cut. Just getting to see the intended version of this movie and it being this good and literally being one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. This movie, if I'm not mistaken, sits in my top 10 favorite superhero movies of all time. I fucking love this movie. It is fantastic. Like, it's like kind of downright appalling that we even saw that other version of the movie. Like, watching this movie, you're sitting there wondering how anyone watched this movie and thought what they released in 2017 was better. Like, there's no defense for that other version existing. Like, this movie is 100% Zack Snyder's vision, closes out the Man of Steel, Batman v Superman in this trilogy so well. Feels like a complete story arc and story, getting to see all three of those movies together. Admittedly, it is a very long movie, and so watching it is a bit of an ask, and that is pretty much the only negative I have towards this movie is the runtime. But I think the runtime is fairly well deserved, right? So it's more of a mixed aspect than a downright negative. Because when you have a 4-hour runtime, you're able to do all this fantastic character work, and you get to spend time with all these characters, and you get to have arcs for all these characters. You get to have little moments for all these characters instead of just, oh, cool, look, Cyborg's here, like they did in the 2017 version, or, oh, cool, look, there's the Flash. No, they actually get to do things in this version. they actually get to have arcs and get to grow, and things make sense. The movie's coherent, right? So, just getting to see this movie is just it's amazing, right? It's just one of the greatest superhero movies that was ever made, or that has ever been made, and this movie deserved to get shown in theaters and not just get relegated to being on streaming services. That is one of the biggest cinematic crimes of my lifetime, is that this movie did not get a wide theatrical release. So anyways, that is my thoughts on the DCEU. Pretty long episode today. We're almost at 40 minutes. So yeah. Yep. That's going to do it for the episode today. If you would like to share your thoughts on the DCEU, go ahead and do so down below in the comment section below. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and have a great rest of your day.